Beautiful Thursday morning here on DelAware. I'm Peter MacArthur. It is September 14th if you're keeping score at home. Latest jobs report that we heard a couple weeks back ended up with a figure that's led to higher employment, an uptick in unemployment. And we're talking with Chris Burkhard, Placer Staffing in Newark, about some of the things happening in the job market right now, like we do. First of all, good morning, Chris. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Pete. It's always an honor to be on your show.
Well, it's great to have you as well. We mentioned here that the unemployment ticked up in the latest report, yet you're saying perhaps that unemployment's in that respect being a little higher might be a good news scenario. Why is that?
I know that's very counterintuitive, but we've been around 3.5%, for the last couple of quarters. And if you look at that, Pete, that's a number that we haven't seen since the late 60s, and most of us don't remember working in the late 60s. So going up from 3.5 to 3.8, it seems like, wow, that would be bad for jobs. That would be bad for things. But in reality, the job market's been excellent for so long that anyone that needed a reason to look for a job is probably now working in the job market. Very few people sidelined. Wages have gone up thanks to inflation. And, there's still 8 million job postings. So The silver lining in this is that the increase in unemployed may slow down rising interest rates, which is actually a loop. It sets in motion that maybe these are the early steps to lowering interest rates, which, here's the point, creates more jobs. So it's actually some of the things that the government is doing to kind of, maybe soften the job market are showing up. Yet it's such a good number. There aren't a lot of people dramatically impacted by this increase.
Chris, we've talked a fair amount about hybrid and work from home, these things that arose from COVID largely. And apparently they're here to stay, yet we're hearing about more and more organizations, some biggies, the federal government among them, that are looking to get people back into the office. How does something like that impact new hires?
Well, I got to tell you, Pete, I probably get an email or two a day from, relationships that are working on this. Return to office is not happening really fast. But leaders are going to they are figuring out how to measure the gains of working in person. And you're going to see the impact of it. Just for example, I don't know, last year, 33% of all roles were hybrid or work from home. It's down to 28% today. And that's just over a few months. So although we talk often about the word of the day is flexibility and that's what workers want, businesses are still very keen on the fact that there's a perception and a belief that productivity and efficiency is best with some combination of in-person. Now, for new hires, to your point, it's a real struggle for new hires to make connections, build relationships. So learning and collaboration and just the chance encounters at the coffee pot or the break room. So there's a concern that it really will hurt people's, I guess you could say, career paths, and it might impact promotions. Now, a lot of people think that businesses can overcome that, and some do. But this is a general discussion, and some companies were built to do that in the old analog way, and they haven't quite mastered it in this, remote world. So it is a real thing that, folks that are new to a company struggle to overcome.
Yeah, and it sounds like employees are going to have to, if they haven't already, kind of tailor their message, if you will, to get people to accept those in-office roles, especially in occupations that have been hybrid or remote for the past couple of years.
Hey, we have that discussion all the time, and the sound bites are the things that I've mentioned. That opportunity, the right project, being more collaborative and creative, getting ahead. These are the things that we talk about, but I can't say convincingly that they work all the time. I think this is the unraveling of what's happened through the pandemic. And I bet if we talk in a month, there'll be another chapter to this story that, it'll unfold a bit.
We've talked about the pandemic hiring spree that has taken place. I guess it's safe to say that that its peak is now over, but we're still seeing critical labor shortages in certain sectors. I'm thinking here like healthcare, law enforcement, aviation. What are the key factors driving these shortages, and what are the solutions to address those, Chris?
Well, I would say the sugar high of hiring of the pandemic is now behind us. I definitely see that. But there are a couple of key drivers with these labor shortages. One challenge is many of the roles, healthcare, law enforcement, aviation, teachers, they're publicly funded roles. And it's very hard to compete with private salaries and private career paths. That is a real fundamental challenge that, as a citizen, we have to think about and decide if we want to do something about that, create a solution. We do have demographic shifts that are against us in so many ways. We have an aging population. I just saw that by 2030, there'll be more folks over 65 than 18 and under by 2030. So there's just fewer workers of prime age to take on some of these professions.
Yeah.
We have low unemployment, so folks don't feel the need to have to find a new career. And maybe most importantly is the role perception, the burnout. These are roles that require a lot of skills and training, and they're hard to replace. But I bet if everybody thinks about their friends and family, I know a lot of teachers that have left the field. And I certainly know that it's been hard to fill classes for new police officers, right, or, prison workers, or even, healthcare. Nurses are changing fields. So there's a very difficult challenge in that they're hard to get skilled and ramped up. And again, I hate to blame this pandemic, but in reality, it created a lot of pressures, a lot of burnout. And these fields in particular have really taken the brunt of it.
Well, because we have a fair amount of retirees, for instance, here in Delaware. Do some of those issues that you mentioned, are they amped up here in the first state because of, the ages of some segments of our population, or does it kind of follow national trends to what you were referring?
It's a really good question. I think that in the early stages of the pandemic, there was a lot of very early retirees, and I'm sure it impacted these fields. I can say firsthand in teaching, many folks retired, 3 years before they thought, or decided to get out in 5 years. So I think it has had an impact. We have talked in your show before that a lot of those folks that retired early did go back into the workforce,
right,
but maybe not in their profession.
Right.
And that's been a really interesting thing as they consider second careers and part-time work or freelance work.
We talked at the top here about a counterintuitive theory, if you will. And we discussed the last time you and I chatted, your new book, Opposite the Crowd. And one of the concepts that you talk about in there is called the culture of one. And a lot of people may not recognize what that is. What is it? How can it help in some of these scenarios we discuss?
Well, of all the questions, is probably the thing I think that can help people the most, Pete. So thank you for giving me the format to help people. First of all, culture of one is knowing who you are, knowing where you are, and what you want from your life, of which your career is a really big part of it.
Right.
But the concept is to spend time on yourself. Applicants and employees have come to me for more years than I'd like to admit. They come to places for a job. But in the end, when we peel it back, there's a life that they want. So we help them with that, but jobs and paychecks alone don't make us happy. I think we all know that. So there's a life we're leading and a life we want. So we help people figure it out, but most of it is by giving them a path on how to spend a half-hour a week on themselves and sort of examine what they want for themselves and get them on that path. And I thought probably the best thing is I did a podcast on this subject, and I'd be happy to give that out if people want it. I literally list the exercise online so people could do it, and that's probably the best way to do it if they're willing to work on themselves.
Let me ask you this, as I hear you discussing culture of one. Did the culture of one get strengthened by COVID at all? In other words, it seems like people have had more of a focus on that balance you referred to, but I suspect the culture of one is something that you've had, as part of your arsenal for longer than COVID.
You're 100% correct. I think it's amped it up. I think that there's a revelation that many workers realize that they're fully in charge of their own career, which of course they know they're in charge of their own life. But many times people take old ideas where they think companies are going to play a parental role, kind of shepherd your career, always have the next thing. So I know that's a dated notion, but it's still in the back of most of our minds, and it's the advice we get from those around us. So there's been a revved up notion where people are very aware of this. But what I think is, I find so many people that, went to school to be an accountant or went to school to do something else. They thought that was the ticket, the education, the knowledge. But in reality, it may not be what they really wanted to do. So what did they do next? And it may have nothing to do with how they want to live their life, where they want to live their life, what they want for themselves. And Pete, there are so many folks that are curious about starting businesses. They think they need a side hustle. And reality is they may not like what they do, and they need to figure out how to change careers. And life comes at us so fast that, by the time you know it, it's Sunday night again, and you had all these ideas about changing your life, and you're back in, I hate to call it a grind, but there is a pattern and a rut that we all pick up. And to make change from that takes tremendous energy. And that's really what this is about, is helping people figure out how to apply the energy to it. And it is not easy. And most people are looking for something to make this go away or somebody to help them do it. And I think that's important. But in the end, my main point is we are responsible for this, and we need to work on it. And that's really my primary ask, is for people to put a half hour into the life they want a week. And that's hard enough.
Lots of people out there nodding their heads to some of the things you just mentioned, Chris. That is for certain. Chris Burkhard, Placer Staffing in Newark, joining us here on WDEL. We shall chat again soon. And as always, thanks for the info this morning. Appreciate it, Chris.
Thank you, Pete. Have a great day.
All right, you do the same. It's 9:48 now here on WDEL.